You know, I don't know why I do this, but I always come out here when it's like crazy sunny, but there are clouds in the sky, and so the light's going to change, and then I'm messing around with my ND filter, and it's so annoying. And so I hope that the light stays somewhat consistent here, but I don't know. I'm looking at these clouds, and I believe I'm going to have to mess with the ND filter pretty soon. So I apologize in advance for that. If it's annoying to you, it's kind of annoying to me, but I have time to do this right now, and so I want to do it because something's been on my mind, and I really feel like I want to talk about this. You know, I think it's quite obvious that, you know, anybody doing YouTube would love to have a gigantic channel, you know, a channel like iJustine or Marcus Brownlee or somebody like that. Like anybody wants to be Matty Hapoya or Potato Jet on YouTube, you know. I mean, you can make more money, you have a further reach. It's like, it's something that everybody's shooting for. And anybody who says they're not is probably lying, you know. But you know, I've been thinking about it as my channel is starting to kind of incrementally get bigger and bigger, and I'm getting more and more comments, and, you know, I try really hard to answer every single comment that comes to my channel. You know, in every video, my intention is to interact with everybody who is kind enough to interact with me. And I try to give a very genuine response every single time. And because, you know, one of the disadvantages of shooting outside all the time, which I do a lot, is obviously that the light changes. Like, you know, you might have a bright sunny day, but if there's clouds in the sky, sometimes the clouds will go over the sun and it gets really dark, and then all of a sudden the clouds go away and it gets really bright, and then I have to start, you know, moving my ND filter around, and it just becomes really annoying. That's why I love shooting on foggy days or overcast days, and actually, that's how I like to shoot my filmmaking stuff. Like, I generally wait for overcast days because, first of all, I like that mood. Like, that's my vibe, you know. That's my whole thing is I like that kind of dark look. But for YouTube videos, you know, I like to wait for those days because, or I like to wait for days where there's not a cloud in the sky. But if you live in New York, those days are few and far between. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to add some B-roll in between those sections so I can kind of make those transitions where I get an opportunity to cut the file, change the color grade to, you know, make the exposure look correct, and then, you know, make it look a little bit more seamless instead of wasting your time while I move the ND filter. But I don't know, you know, like at first I was just going to leave it, but then I thought, that's disrespectful of your time. So I wanted to explain it here and stick the B-roll in there, and hopefully I have enough B-roll, but, you know, we'll see about that. There we go. Because that's the way I feel it should be done, you know? So that's what I do. Sorry about this. So anyway, I am here to argue that there might be an advantage to having a smaller channel. And, you know, I still think that everybody should try to get monetized because everybody deserves that, you know, and everyone deserves to be paid for their time. And I'm not saying everybody should be able to earn a living on YouTube. I mean, I wish that were the case, but everybody should at least try to be monetized because I also think that it's good to have goals, and it's good to be constantly thinking about doing better, you know, making your channel better, making better videos, being a filmmaker, because, you know, whether you like it or not, if you're on YouTube, you're kind of a filmmaker. You know, you might not know it, but if you're talking into a camera and you're dealing with audio and light and stuff like that, composition, you're trying to make it look good, you know, even if you're on easy mode, you're a filmmaker. You know, easy mode is kind of like you're a documentary filmmaker, you know. If you're having a real channel, well, I don't want to say real as opposed to not real, but if you're going a little bit further in terms of your effort to make it look good, then you're more of like a narrative filmmaker. So the argument that I'm trying to make, here we go, is that, which way am I going here? The argument that I'm trying to make is that, you know, if your channel stays somewhat manageable, you know, I'm not saying small, but I'm saying if it stays somewhat manageable where you can, if you make the effort, answer every single comment. If you can take the time, take an hour of your life, take 2 hours, whatever it takes. You know, if you're being monetized, take 2-3 hours, whatever you need, to answer every single comment. the only way you're going to be able to do that is if your channel remains somewhat small. And I'm talking about, like, you know, like for me, the biggest video that I've ever had so far has been like 15,000 views, right? And that sounds enormous to some people, but to other people on YouTube, it sounds tiny. If I'm iJustine, who I mentioned before, that's probably a tiny, teeny little video for her. But for me, it's big, and it's kind of getting to the threshold of being unmanageable, to not be able to answer everybody, because sometimes you don't even see every comment. Like, it just doesn't show up in the app, you know, and then, you know, weeks or months later, you look back and you see something like, oh my God, I didn't respond to this. And then you get to it then. But I think the advantage to a smaller channel is that you have a more personal interaction with people. You can kind of get to know people. And, you know, I have some serious boundaries too, because I'm a performing artist. I'm on stage professionally, you know, in the theater. And also I do movies. So sometimes people get the wrong impression about the kind of relationship that they have with you, that they think they have with you, as, you know, you're a performer. And so I've learned that I've had to create boundaries also, to be very careful about that, because there are a lot of crazy people out here. Oh man, this sucks, right? You know, I prefer shooting with prime lenses most of the time, but one of the advantages of shooting with a zoom lens is that when I'm doing something like this, when I'm cutting into a video to correct the exposure issues because the sun's going in and out, I can change the focal length and make it look a little bit more interesting, so you're not looking at the exact same perspective every time I cut in. And that's kind of cool. And I can even, you know, like, this feels a little bit more intense than what I was doing before. This is 50 millimeters and I'm right up against the lens. Before, I was shooting at 28 millimeters, which is kind of like my go-to. And in fact, I generally shoot 28 and 50 almost everything that I do. Like my filmmaking, I'm shooting 28 millimeters and 50 millimeters 90% of the time, unless I'm using my anamorphic lenses. So there's that. But anyway, let's get back to the regular video. But all things considered, and you know, when you're talking about people who are not crazy and not out of their minds, crazy stalker people, it's really valuable to be able to exchange with people. Like, you know, I have a lot of people in my life who are very close to me, who I've met through my professional work as a performing artist and as a writer and as somebody who teaches workshops and is always on stage, you know, like in front of people and on video, and, you know, people see me all the time. And some of the relationships that I have in my life are from that world, and not just co-workers, but audience members as well. And I think that's really valuable. You can also make the argument that you could actually make more money having a smaller channel, because, you know, when you have a smaller channel and you're actually interacting with people, they're more likely to come forward and be your Patreon members. They're more likely to come through when you're doing a fundraiser to do a project. They're more likely to, if they have a business, sponsor you. You know, they're more likely to believe in you on a personal level because you have some sort of a conversation going on with them all the time. And so you're not going to have that with a gigantic channel. And of course, the gigantic channel is going to get big sponsors. You know, you're going to get, you know, like Squarespace and things like that, you know, so that can pay for your life for a year at a time. I mean, there's definitely advantages to that. But I think there are great advantages to keeping it reasonable as well. And so I ain't mad at being a small channel, you know. And I also, by the way, I don't like the term small channel. I don't like the term small YouTubers because, you know, small has kind of a negative connotation. So I just want to say that it's better to have numbers that are not quite as large as the gigantic channels. There can be great advantages to that, and I don't think that you should be discouraged if you're not seeing yourself headed in that direction, if you don't see yourself becoming Marcus Brownlee or iJustine or somebody like that. I don't think there are disadvantages to that. I think if you focus on your craft, especially if you're an artist like me, if you focus on the work that you're doing, if you try to do your best all the time, if you're putting out videos that you're proud of, you know, if you're doing stuff that's promoting the other work that you're doing outside of YouTube, I think you should be okay. I think you should be happy with that. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. You know, there's nothing that should make you feel less than anybody else. So that's that part of this video. The other thing I wanted to talk about that I've been thinking about was, you know, a lot of people have emailed me through my website saying, yo, I thought this was a filmmaking channel. Why aren't you talking about cameras anymore? You know, and I didn't ever always talk about cameras anyway. I mean, I have a whole series called Stories in 4K where I was just telling stories. I mean, I'm a storyteller. I'm a solo theater artist. I mean, that's what I do for a living. You know, I'm an actor. I'm a filmmaker. You know, so I'm not here. I mean, honestly, this is going to sound kind of messed up, but I don't give a shit about cameras, really. Like, okay, let me clarify that. I love my camera. I have a Lumix S5, a Panasonic S5. It's the original one. It's not the newest one. It doesn't have the great autofocus. It doesn't have all that stuff. And see, now I'm shooting at 24 millimeters on this. By the way, I'm using the Panasonic 20 to 60 kit lens for this. And so, obviously, that's a zoom lens. So now I'm at 24 millimeters, which is a focal length that I hardly ever use. And I'm at f3.8. So this, you know, lens only goes as fast as f3.5, and then I would have to be at 20 millimeters. So, you know, I'm just trying to change it up a little bit here and compensate for the sun going in and out, like I said. But it is interesting to use, like I like using this lens during the day when I'm just running around doing anything, you know what I mean? Because it's really convenient to have a zoom lens. I don't necessarily look at the focal length all the time. I just kind of compose the shot the way I want to. And generally, I treat it as a manual. I mean, I treat it as, well, first of all, I'm always in manual mode. I don't use autofocus, but I treat it like a prime lens, you know? Like I don't generally move my focal length around when I'm using a zoom lens even. But sometimes I do push in a little bit or pull out a little bit. Pull out, that sounded dirty, I'm sorry. But anyway, I generally, you know, only zoom in or out for composition if I really, really see something that's bothering me. So anyway, this is 24 millimeters. Let's get back to the video. And sorry about this up and down light thing. It's just annoying, and I know it's whatever. Let's go back. But it's an amazing creative tool. Absolutely amazing. And I love it so much. And, you know, I think I love it so much because it's my camera. And I know how to use it. And I know this thing inside out, you know. And so, yes, I love this camera. I love my audio equipment. I got a Hollyland Lark Max, which I'm using right now. And I'm using a purple Panda lavalier mic plugged into the Hollyland. And so I love dealing with this. I love dealing with light. I love shaping light. I love studying light. I love composition. I love studying the art of filmmaking. And I love cameras. And I do. And I am a gear freak. I am. I'm a geek. But I don't give a shit about, you know, what other cameras are compared to my camera, because as long as my camera, whoop, there goes the light. As long as my camera is allowing me to tell the stories that I want to tell, is allowing me to make the films that I want to make, you know, is allowing me to contribute in the way that I want to contribute my art. I don't give a shit about any of these other cameras. And to me, the notion of like switching from one camera to another all the time and, you know, trying to have something because, you know, if you get a camera and you see that that camera company is putting out more cameras than your camera company, so it means that it's some kind of path to the future for you because you want to keep buying cameras. Like, I don't understand that. I don't get that. You know, like I'm a guitar player. I have a guitar that is so beat up and so old, and I love it. Like I would never think of buying another, like a new guitar sounds terrible to me. I want the guitar. I know what it sounds like. I know what it feels like. And I don't care that it's scraped up and all that, you know? I mean, I don't understand that. I don't. I think cameras are the only thing like that other than maybe phones. Phones are kind of like that. And maybe phones started that whole thing where, you know, as soon as you bought a phone, you thought you needed the next new phone. You know, you had to upgrade your phone every year. I mean, I have a little iPhone mini. The reason I bought this phone is because Apple will support this with security updates for like the next 8 years. And I don't want to switch phones. I used LG phones for years because I loved LG phones. I never felt like I had to upgrade to the newest, greatest phone. And it's the same way with cameras. Like, you know, I think people who are upgrading their camera all the time, I bet you they ain't doing much. Like, what kind of work are they doing? They don't have time. Yo, did you know that the Panasonic S5 has an APS-C mode, which means I can punch in 1.5 times closer than I can if I'm just using the regular full frame. So right now I have the lens at 60 millimeters, but I'm in APS-C mode, so this is what 90 millimeters looks like. So this is pretty intense. You know what I mean? Like this, you would use in a film if you're really trying to get into somebody's head in a moment that's maybe very emotional or stressful, or there's a lot of anxiety involved or something like that, or if you're really trying to make a point. This is kind of a cool focal length to use, you know, in moderation. Like I wouldn't use it too much. Maybe I'd use it once or twice in an entire film, maybe. But it is kind of cool. And, you know, it's helping me to get through this issue of the light being all over the place today. So back to the video. And by the way, it takes a lot to actually master your camera, to really learn it. And I know, you know, a lot of professional cinematographers, they don't even own their own camera. Like I have a friend who is just that, a professional cinematographer. He's a camera operator, and he doesn't even own his own camera because he knows when he does a project and he gets on set, they're handing him a camera that the director and the producer and the writer decided, and he all together decided what was the right tool for this project. And so we're going with Arri Alexas. We're going with, you know, Sony Venice. I mean, he knows that he has to be able to use any camera. But if you're the rest of the universe, you know, the other 99% who has to own their own camera to do projects, oh man, I'm so sorry about this. This is nonsense. So I figured I might as well show you what 20 millimeters looks like, even though I almost never use this. Occasionally I'll use it like when I need it. You know what I mean? Like actually, I had the Sigma 28-70 f2.8 zoom lens, which a lot of people think is much better than this lens because you can get f2.8 at all the focal lengths. And this is a variable aperture lens. So it goes from f3.5 to f5.6, depending on the focal length. Like the longer the focal length, the slower the lens gets, which means it gets darker, which means you don't get as much, you know, depth of field. I mean, you do get depth of field because a long focal length tends to give you that kind of compression anyway, the closer you get to the lens. But one thing I noticed about this lens is it's not parfocal. And if you don't know what that means, what it means is as you change the focal length on the zoom lens, it should stay in focus. But I think they say it's parfocal, but I notice when I change focal lengths, I have to refocus. It's close, but it's not exactly the way I want it. So anyway, this is what 20 millimeters looks like. And you could see the whole car practically, like back window, side window, building behind me, like, and I'm right here, like the lens is right there, like I could touch the lens right there. So 20 millimeters is really close. So it's a big difference. And hopefully I've done enough of these now, and hopefully this helped the video and all of that. So yeah, let's get back to the video. I'm going to stop annoying you now. You want to have a camera that you're really familiar with, that you know how to use, that gets out of your way, that allows you to create art. You know, you're not, I mean, I don't know. All right, one last cut in, and this time at 35 millimeters, which is a favorite focal length for a lot of filmmakers because 35 millimeters, you can get a close shot like this and it looks pretty good, but it's also considered a wide focal length. So if I turn this around, and I'll show you that after I finish this part right here, but if I turn this around, it's a pretty wide point of view. And so 35 millimeters is pretty flexible, and on this lens you can get as fast as f4.5. And f4.5 is fine. Like I personally shoot at f8 a lot of the time. Like people think they must shoot at the fastest aperture that a lens can do, but I think that's not filmmaking. You know, that's not thinking of story. That's just thinking of getting the most out of your gear, which really has absolutely nothing to do with anything. You know, the story should really, you know, move you to do what you want to do with the gear. The gear shouldn't move the story. Like you don't do it like that. So anyway, I might as well say I love this lens. It's the Panasonic 20-60 kit lens. It's really inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. It's a great, you know, all-around carry day to day. I would only really use it during the day because it's not really fast enough for night shooting. I mean, unless you have lights and you can control the space and do whatever you want. Like if you have a full lighting setup, then this lens is fine for pretty much anything. I have a Moment Cinebloom filter on it, so it takes some of the sharpness away, which it's a little bit too sharp for my liking. And then I have an ND filter on top of that filter. And So yeah, you've seen, let me see, 20, you've seen 24, you saw 28, now you see 35, you saw 50, you saw 90 because I had it at 60 on APS-C mode, and that made it 90. Like, wow, this is almost like a lens review inside of this video talking about other things. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, you got a lot of value out of this, so you're welcome. You know, I'm not trying to judge anybody. I don't really care what you do, to be honest. But I'm going to have to get some B-roll to hide all this shit that I'm doing. I don't know. Like, personally, I'm just saying I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. I'm not even looking at camera videos, you know? I have no idea what the latest, greatest camera is right now. I mean, I do know somewhat. I'm not going to lie, because I do watch YouTube, and there are certain camera space people that I enjoy watching. But I'm not looking for the latest Canon camera or even the latest Lumix. Like, I know there's the S5 II and the S5 IIX. I have absolutely no desire to upgrade to those cameras because I don't feel like I can get anything better out of them than I can get out of this camera. And for me personally, I don't use autofocus. And so I think that's the only advantage to those cameras, in my opinion. I don't need to shoot directly straight to an SSD, you know, drive, and I don't need 8K or 6K, or I don't need that. You know, 4K is fine for me. You know, that's pretty fucking awesome to be able to shoot 4K, 60, 4K, you know, like that's fine. I don't care if there's a crop. I do understand the disadvantage of it, but if it really bothers me, I could shoot in 1080. I also have a Panasonic GH5 as a backup camera, and I feel like that camera is so advanced. I don't understand like why anybody doesn't buy that as their first camera. It is such an amazing camera. So I guess what I'm saying is that's why I'm not talking that much about cameras and stuff. Yeah, I am somewhat of a filmmaking channel, I guess you could say that, but I'm much more than that. You know, I'm an artist who's interested in storytelling, and I'm an artist who's interested in using his art to speak about challenging things in the world and try to turn them into something beautiful. I'm interested in entertaining people. I'm interested in the challenge of filmmaking and theater work, and trying to overcome all the obstacles and the challenges that it takes to get to the end of a story and be able to share it with people. You know, at the end of the day, I'm just really interested in sharing my work with people, and I don't need to have the latest camera. If I have any camera in my hand, even if it's my phone, god damn, these clouds suck, yo. And if I could get to the end and finish this and have it formatted in a way that it can show up on HBO or Netflix or Amazon, or if it's worthy of that, or just, you know, anywhere where it looks like something of that level, I'm happy. And that's pretty much any camera. Any camera, 8-bit, 10-bit, whatever. Almost any camera allows you to do that. So I don't really care. I just want to have something that I like, that works well for me, that is easy for me to use, that supports my workflow and the way I do things. The fact that I use anamorphic lenses and vintage lenses, that's all I really care about. I don't care about anything else. I don't need to have the latest, greatest cameras. So that answers that question, hopefully. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about. You know, and to make the people happy who were kind of upset with me because I'm not talking enough about cameras, I am working on a video right now talking about gear for people who want to get into YouTube, who are maybe thinking, you know, I could just do easy mode. And I'm going to make a video showing you that there's pretty easy entree to kind of facilitate you. Okay, one more thing. And this time I'm shooting at 60 millimeters in full frame mode. So before you saw 60 millimeters APS-C mode, which made it 90 millimeters. Now you're seeing straight up 60 millimeters in full frame mode. This is f5.6. This is the slowest the lens gets, which means it's the least amount of light that could get onto the sensor, which is kind of a cool thing about the Panasonic S5, because I have dual native ISO, which means when my ISO is set to 640, that's the first native ISO, and 4000 is the second native ISO when I need more light. And it'll keep the image just as clean as 640. So it's a great advantage. But what I wanted to add was that the lenses that I use, I have a Minolta 28mm f2.8 vintage lens, all manual. I have a Minolta, it's called a Minolta Telesor. They gave it a name. Then I have two Minolta Rokkor lenses, 35mm f2.8, all manual, same thing, and 50mm f1.4. So it's really fast, great in low light. Also a Rokkor, vintage lens. Then I have two anamorphic lenses. I have a Sirui 35mm f1.8 and a Sirui 75mm f2.8. No, f1.8. And what's cool about those lenses is that they're APS-C anamorphic lenses, so the math is a little bit different. They're 1.5 times crop, but then you have to divide by the squeeze factor, which is 1.33 of those lenses. So the 35 is really like a 40, and the 75 is kind of like an 84 or 85. So you have classic 40, 85. Pretty cool. So anyway, what I wanted to share was I wanted to first of all tell you the lenses that I use. No autofocus lenses except for this one, but I don't even use autofocus, so they all might as well be manual focus lenses. And here's the thing that I want to share. If you're a solo shooter, and listen, if you're a filmmaker, you know all of this. I know you're rolling your eyes, but if you're not, if you're a solo shooter, just trying to be on YouTube, just trying to learn, I just want to tell you, if you are willing to learn about aperture and how it works, and what depth of field actually means, and how much in focus you have when you're at a slower aperture like an f5.6, f7.1, f8, whatever, f4 as opposed to f2.8. Like, the faster the aperture, the harder it is to focus. And if you learn how to use aperture lenses, I mean, you know, manual lenses, and if you understand how aperture works, you can save yourself so much money because you do not need autofocus for 99% of the stuff that you're doing. The only time autofocus is really a great advantage is, yeah, for stuff like this, obviously it makes it easier, but to me it's not an advantage. It's like if you're lazy, this is great because then you don't have to focus on something that's fixed. But if you are looking for a lens that has to follow things around, like if you're working for the NBA or you're shooting high school sports or you're shooting, you know, birds that are moving around, then you might want to have that continual autofocus. That is an advantage, and that's kind of cool. I don't do any of that, you know. But for actual filmmaking, I mean, and for YouTube stuff and for solo shooting stuff, if you understand aperture, you can save yourself so much money. You could get like a Panasonic S5, the original one, for like $700 or $800 used, and I'm telling you, this is a movie-making machine. It's incredible. And so, yeah, you'll pay extra for autofocus, like get the new S9, excuse me, get the new Panasonic S9, get a Sony A6700, something like that. Get into Sony A6400. You're still going to spend upwards of $700, $800, $900, you know. Get a Sony ZV-E1. You're going to spend $650, $700 because they're autofocus cameras. And then you're going to need autofocus lenses too. And, you know, they're not more expensive. Well, they are more expensive because vintage lenses are the cheapest lenses you can get. I mean, you can get lenses for $25, $30, and you can experiment with them. So I would highly recommend learning about aperture and how it works, committing to learning how to do that and practice with it, and then perhaps save yourself a lot of money. And at the same time, improving your skill as a filmmaker. That's pretty cool. So anyway, this is 60 millimeters full frame. I promise I'm going to stop bothering you now. We're going to finish the video and all of that. All right. Being a little bit better than just easy mode, that you can create something aesthetically pleasing to everybody and, you know, have you learning and evolving as an artist and as a human being, you know, like getting better. Like, what's wrong with improving your skills in whatever you happen to be doing? If you're going to be spending a lot of time making YouTube videos, you might as well learn how to do them well. That'll help you to get your story out better. It'll help you to share with people better. It'll be easier for people when they come to your channel. They will appreciate you so much, and you will have a great sense of accomplishment. Like, I did this, you know, I learned how to use this stuff, and now I have more flexibility in the way I present what I want to present. And so I'm going to stop now because I got stuff to do. And I hope this wasn't too annoying. And I'm going to grab a little bit of B-roll so I can cover up some of these annoying moments, but I'm going to leave all the audio in so you could laugh while I'm doing that, saying, yo, he's just trying to cover up that bullshit that he was shooting when the sun kept going up and down. And you know what? It's all fun. It's all good. Still, I am praying heavily for everybody in California and the wildfires right now. I want to mention that on every video right now, and I really hope that the federal government helps all these people and gives them money and gets them back on their feet in a way where they don't have any debt, where they do not have to pay anybody back. That's what I'm praying for. And thanks for watching, and thanks for putting up with this. I know this was really fucking annoying. And so I'm going to put us out of our pain now. I hope it wasn't painful, but you know what I'm saying. All right.